If you are just now joining us, please take a moment to silence all electronic devices. This is to ensure that all teams are provided with a fair environment. We also ask that you wait to move in and out of the session until after our team is done presenting. And please, unless you have official national credentials to video or you're with the team that's presenting, please refrain from videoing. Thank you for your cooperation. With the courtesy cord, please secure all doors and hallways. Are the judges ready? Our second team is from the Madison FFA chapter in the state of North Carolina. Team members include Jessica Frisbee, Angelique Marchese, Bergen Mackey, Tyler Massey, and Clark Fowler.
We're ready to start. Please be seated. Would the plaintiff and the defendant please raise their right hands? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jessica Frisbee, and I'll be presiding over this court, which is being held to determine the outcome of the Marchese versus CTS-EPA dispute over the former CTS plant site and surrounding areas located in Mills Gap, Asheville, North Carolina. The defendant for the Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Tyler Massey, is the president of the Superfund program. The Superfund program is responsible for cleaning up and managing hazardous waste sites throughout the nation. Mr. Massey is also an official representative for CTS. He wishes to clear all said charges from the plaintiff, Ms. Angel Marchese, who owns a 50-acre farm adjacent to the site. Ms. Marchese is suing CTS and the EPA for damages against her property, as well as bodily damages that have incurred and have been possibly linked to the cleaning chemical trichloroethylene. CTS, or the Chicago Telephone Supply Company, bought the tract of land in 1959 and later stopped manufacturing, then sold the land to the Mills Gap Road Associates in 1986. I shall now call upon Mr. Bergen Mackey, attorney for the plaintiff, to give his opening remarks. Mr. Mackey, are you prepared to do so?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
For years, CTS released dangerous chemicals, such as TCE, into the groundwater that feeds multiple wells in the Mills Gap community. Numerous studies have indicated that the chemical TCE, or trichloroethylene, has been linked to certain cancers, tumors, and other maladies. Ms. Marchese owns a 50-acre plot of land in this location, and many members of her family have become very sick with cancer, thyroid complications, and compromised immune systems, which are linked to TCE exposure. TCE has also been found at extremely dangerous levels in the groundwater that feeds the Marchese well. Without due process, we are allowing CTS and the EPA to shun their responsibilities of cleaning up the contamination and compensating the Marchese family for damages. It is imperative that we protect the health of our citizens and our natural resources. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Now I will ask Mr. Clark Fowler, attorney for the defendant, to give his opening remarks as well. Mr. Fowler, are you prepared to do so?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. For decades, CTS has been producing electronic parts that are shipped all over the world. These products were degreased with a chemical called trichloroethylene, or TCE, which has been used as a components cleaner and even as a general anesthetic. There's a specific limit for the chemical in soil, air, and water supply. However, the use of TCE is not illegal. To ease the community's concerns, CTS Corporation's contractor, Culligan, began installing whole-house water filtration systems for homes within a 1-mile radius of the CTS site, and the EPA has distributed free bottles of water. The EPA has also inserted a soil vapor extraction system on the old CTS site. As you can see, CTS and the EPA have taken appropriate measures to ease the concerns of the community, and there is no reason for us, the defendants, to pay the plaintiff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Now, Mr. Mackey, would you like to call a witness to the stand?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls the plaintiff, Ms. Angel Marchese, to the stand. Ms. Marchese, what are your reasons for bringing this suit in front of a court?
I grew up on that farm, and it's been in my family for generations. My simple request is to see the site cleaned up for the present and future health of my family and my community. If I don't fight CTS and EPA to justice, then who will?
When did your family start noticing that there was a correlation between the illnesses linked to TCE exposure across the generations?
Well, Mr. Mackey, in 1990, I knew nothing of the testing going on next door at the CTS site. I also knew nothing when they tested the water on my property without my permission. And therefore, I had no reason to believe that my family's developing health problems were caused by our water. In 2001, my husband was diagnosed with a rare and inoperable brain tumor. He's a war veteran. Do you think someone who fought for our country overseas, saw the worst things imaginable, but still came home to be a father to our children, deserves to be dying of something as common as the water we drink, bathe, wash our dishes in, and the air we breathe every day? I know I don't.
Can you share your knowledge about CTS and EPA's history with the site to the court?
In the 1980s, CTS filed a report acknowledging the generation and disposal of hazardous waste off-site. They had reported the nearest residents live 500 yards away from the site, and they all use city water. But these statements are factually incorrect. They had later reported the nearest residents live 500 yards away, and they had also reported there are no known drinking wells in the area, and the site poses no threat to human health. But in reality, my spring, which is fed by the creek, is located about 50 feet away, and the whole time CTS has been dumping waste directly into it. In fact, there are numerous residents within 4 miles of CTS site that rely on this well water. So we filed a civil lawsuit in 2010, and we sued CTS for damages against our health and property values and to clean up that site immediately. Our current and former governmental officials have even admitted that enforcing the Safe Drinking Water Act, which establishes the goal of eliminating high concentrations of toxic chemicals, such as TCE, into our water, is not a federal priority. And for the sake of my family and my community, I believe it should be.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marchese. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Mr. Fowler, would you like to question the defendant, the plaintiff, as well?
Yes, I would, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Marchese, do you and your family currently live on the land?
Yes, sir.
Have you noticed any adverse side effects from living on this particular piece of land?
I have. Many of my family members have become extremely ill. And as I mentioned earlier, when the facility was operational, waste were dumped directly into an adjacent creek that feeds my spring, flows onto my property, and onto the property of 2 local schools. In 2007, TCE was found in my spring at 293,000 parts per billion. The federal legal limit for TCE in the water is 5 parts per billion, and the state limit is 3. So I brought this problem up to an EPA official on the case, and they installed a soil vapor extraction system over my cropland because I'm so concerned of the effects that it's having on my crops and my livestock. Now, the purpose of this extraction system is to remove contaminants from beneath the soil. But soil vapor extraction does not work in clay soils, and it does not help the fact that TCE is already in my drinking water.
But you do get a harvest done on livestock, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Marchese, if I'm not mistaken, did the county not provide city water to the residents of Mills Gap community?
They did, but it's very expensive
Thank you,
for
Ms.
my
Marchese.
livestock.
Ms.
and
Marchese,
it does not
that's
affect
all.
the
Ms. Marchese,
groundwater.
I'm done. Thank you. The defense rests, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. If there are no further questions, you may step down from the stand, Ms. Marchese. Mr. Fowler, would you like to call a witness to the stand?
Yes, I would, Your Honor. The defense calls Mr. Tyler Massey, President of the Superfund Division of the EPA, to the stand. Now, Mr. Massey, what exactly is a Superfund site?
Well, Mr. Fowler, a Superfund site is where the federal government is dedicated to cleaning up uncontrolled hazardous waste sites. Ever since the tragic environmental catastrophes of the Love Canal and Times Beach events, the Superfund program was made to not only clean up dangerous dump sites, but also to prevent them. We work to give citizens a safe place to live and grow their families. And at this particular site, I feel we have done just that.
Now, Mr. Massey, please specify to the court, how much have you exactly done for this particular site?
So far, we are on our way to getting this site off the national priorities list. This is where we decide who needs help first. It is a long process, and we are going to finish it to the T. And so far, as you have mentioned, we have provided bottled water to the community to help until it is officially off the list.
Mr. Massey, do the residents have to pay for their bottled water?
No, sir.
And the soil vapor extraction system, is that any cost to the community?
No, it is not.
That's very generous of the EPA. And I would also like to point out to the court that maintenance on the water filtration systems is no cost to the community whatsoever. And Mr. Massey, just one more thing. Can you verify that these documents are accurate to where the EPA took samples for trichloroethylene?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. The defense rests, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Mr. Mackey, would you also like to question the defendant?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Mr. Massey, how is the EPA involved at the CTS site?
We at the EPA Superfund Division have been looking deeply into this case since it was brought to our attention in 1992, after the North Carolina Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, or NCDENR, took samples around the CTS site and sent a letter to us at the EPA. Our first investigation was in 1998, followed by a more in-depth investigation that began in 2006 and ended in the year of 2009. As I said to Mr. Fowler, we have given much of our time and resources towards helping the community. And also, may I point out, that we have followed every official procedure set by our governmental standards. And these accusations against us are simply not true.
I've lost numerous family members and more
Order!
dying from
Miss Marchese! Miss Marchese, if you continue with these outbursts, I will excuse you from this courtroom. Please continue with your statement, Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I was saying, it is because of these misled accusations that the EPA and CTS are innocent and do not need to provide any more funding because the problem is already being solved.
What do you know about the soil vapor extraction systems that were placed on Ms. Marchese's property?
Soil vapor extraction system is a tried and tested method for removing chemicals out of soils. It is very effective, and within 6 months may have removed up to 90% of all contaminants out of the area.
Are you aware that studies have shown that soil vapor extraction systems do not work well on the clay soils found on Ms. Marchese's property?
Given the situation at hand, it was the best effort we could put forth at the time.
Best effort. Mr. Massey, why did your department place a CTS site on the Superfund list?
From our records, we weren't sure at the time who owned the land or who had contaminated the area. But because some samples taken at the site showed that some areas had higher than normal levels of TCE, we thought it would be best to put it on the Superfund list.
Speaking of TCE, can you explain to the court what its effects are on humans?
The effects can be harmful, but they are potentially curable and treatable.
You're avoiding the question, Mr. Massey. How does TCE specifically affect humans?
Sleepiness, fatigue, headache, and confusion are acute effects of TCE.
Ladies and gentlemen of the court, what Mr. Massey clearly does not know is that many leaders in the medical community have conducted research indicating that TCE exposure has been linked to numerous terminal illnesses. Moving on, Mr. Massey, why did you move the testing sites on Ms. Marchese's property from where they were legally authorized to another location on site without authorization?
Please excuse me while I converse with my lawyer on this question. Further research on the other location on Ms. Marchese's property was necessary to better monitor the situation and to better protect Ms. Marchese and her family.
I'm sure you were deeply concerned with the well-being of Ms. Marchese.
Objection, Your Honor.
The jury will disregard Mr. Mackey's comment. If there are no more questions, you may step down from the stand, Mr. Massey. Mr. Mackey, have you prepared a closing statement for the court?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a glass of water. Clean, cool, and refreshing. Now imagine someone telling you that the very same glass of water that you were drinking was killing you. What would you do? That is happening today. We cannot afford to allow anyone to stray from their responsibility to ensure our right to pure resources. It is obvious that the impacts on the health of this community and the environment have been severe. CTS and the EPA must do more, and all we ask of you to do is to help protect the health of this community and the environment. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Mr. Fowler, have you also prepared a closing statement for the court?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, as you have heard, Mr. Massey and I have explained that the EPA and CTS have taken appropriate measures to ease the concerns of the community. Everything has been taken care of according to governmental standards. We have spent tremendous amounts of money and resources in handling this problem, and we feel we have simply done all we can do to help Ms. Marchese, her family, and her community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed both sides of the Marchese versus CTS-EPA environmental issue. Both the plaintiff and the defendant have produced convincing cases. Should Ms. Marchese accept the actions taken by CTS and the EPA for their water contamination cleanup efforts? Or should she request more aid and support for her family as well as her community now and into the future? We encourage you to follow this case as it has been periodically discussed by the U.S. Supreme Court as well as inspected by the EPA's Office of Inspector General to determine a closure for this grave environmental issue. Thank you. Are there any questions?
This question is pointed to Ms. Marchese. You made a statement early on about your husband being a war veteran and having a brain tumor.
Yes, sir.
Are there any studies, or have there been any studies that specifically link that chemical to any type of cancer? Link it to, I'm saying it caused it. Is there any?
There have been studies. However, TCE has not been proven as a known carcinogen. It is only a possible carcinogen. However, the breakdowns of TCE, such as vinyl chloride, are a known carcinogen that can be linked to brain tumor. And because there's such a high number of cancer cases, there are plenty of doctors and especially the CDC that are looking into this case because TCE should be known as a known carcinogen.
Thank you.
Discuss the impact on one particular family here and illnesses and cancer. Have you looked at illness and cancer rates in this area compared to maybe others in the region or the state to see if there really is an impact in this region from this site?
Within, I think, about 1 mile of the CTS site in radius, there have been 74 cases of various terminal illnesses such as Hodgkin's disease, various cancers, and also development of epileptic seizures.
How does that compare then to rates in the rest of the state?
I'm not entirely sure on the specific rates in North Carolina, but as we do live there, I've never seen another area that's quite affected in such a way.
In your bibliography, you state interviews with advocates or people who were advocating on behalf of the cleanup. Why did you not interview anybody that was from the other side?
We actually did, but unfortunately it was not until after our state portfolio had to be turned in. We actually got to meet with the representatives of the EPA and CTS that were present at the Office of Inspector General meeting. We got to speak with them, and they told us their side of the case, and it really gave us an eye-opener. Unfortunately, it was a little late to put on the portfolio. So
could you just paraphrase why that was eye-opening?
It's interesting to see the different side of the story because hearing one side of the story from the residents is a lot different than hearing, hey, we're putting in as much as time and money as we possibly can right now. We're facing problems too, but we are trying. And that, I think, is something that isn't getting across on the EPA side enough.
Okay, left side of the stage. Is TCE currently used or found in consumer products? If so, name a few.
Yes, trichloroethylene, like I said, is still used in the industry of manufacturing to degrease metal parts, and it is also used in dry cleaning as well. And it's been used for many years, and it is not illegal.
Okay, this question is also directed to the defense attorney here. Is there any specific proof of TCE harming either cattle or having a residual effect on our food source, that being of plant or animal origin?
Well, according to the CDC, trichloroethylene was exposed to lab animals, and it only showed, for inhalation of trichloroethylene, it showed medium toxicity, and for consumption, moderate toxicity.
Okay, was there any residual effect, though, in, say you went to the grocery store and bought a steak that had been raised around this contaminated area? Has there been any research on that it could actually harm our food chain?
No, not currently.
Thank you.
In your portfolio, you mentioned that there was a case brought in February 2012, and the judge dismissed the resident's lawsuit. Can you give us the basis for why that was dismissed?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. In your portfolio, you talk about a judge's decision in February 2012 where a resident's lawsuit was dismissed. And can you give us the basis for that decision?
Yes. Well, and on the federal level, the case has been at the Supreme Court. The case was ruled in favor of CTS because of the statute of limitations, which states that an institution cannot be filed against after 10 years of the company holding the land or selling the land. The land was sold to the Mills Gap Road Associates in 1986, and the civil lawsuit was filed in 2010. That's about 30 years, so that well exceeds the statute of limitations. However, the North Carolina General Assembly is also working on a resolution to the issue in favor of the residents to try to help them and compensate them and clean up the site. So,
many of you have stated that there's numerous studies that link either pro or con. Can you name a few of those studies?
The USDA actually issued a study in lab animals where they were exposed to high amounts of trichloroethylene. The resulting number of cancer cases was not disclosed, but according to the information, it was very, very high. They developed cancer a lot in their kidneys and livers, along with several other places, such as their bones and even their blood.
Why do the allowable TCE levels vary between federal and state, and is it of significance?
North Carolina is stricter on the levels. I'm pretty sure Mr. Massey and Clark would know a little bit more about that, considering they deal with the laws more than I as a resident do. But North Carolina is stricter on the water quality laws than the EPA is right now. I think they're working on making it a match soon.
And is it of significance?
I believe it is of significance.
Scientific significance?
I feel like EPA isn't as needs to tighten up on their laws, that they need to be a little bit more on their water quality like North Carolina.
I don't want to have the young man in the white shirt feel left out here, so we're going to ask you a question. This is kind of pointed in your area. These homes were built on this site that was abandoned, obviously, and I know, being from Michigan, we have certain laws that we have to abide by in order to have a home approved to live in, and one of them would be the water quality. Were any of these wells tested before these people moved in? I mean, was this a known fact when they moved into this house?
No, they were not tested for TCE specifically because it was not known that it was.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions.
At this time, we'll allow the judges a few moments to finish scoring. If you need to leave for any reason, now would be the time.